Hello my friends. As many of you know, Transpose is my favorite puzzle game, and I've recently had the opportunity to interview the main developer behind the game. It was a great conversation, and it was fascinating to hear how the game was made. The interview was conducted over Skype, since I'm in Minneapolis and they're in Toronto, so near the end there were some dropouts in the audio which I apologize for. So feel free to put up your feet, grab a beverage, and hear some fascinating behind the scenes for the development of Transpose. All right, everyone, thank you for joining us. We have on the line Josh Manricks. He is product lead and head of tech and content at Secret Location. And as many of you know, Secret Location made Transpose, which is my #1 favorite puzzle game. I absolutely love it. And Josh, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you, Ben.
So product lead and head of tech and content, that sounds like a pretty big deal. What does that really mean?
I oversee, I guess, all the technology in our content department. I'm not actually head of the content department. I'm just in charge of the technology that we develop here at Secret Location. So I have a high-level sort of overview on all our development projects that we have going on, all our prototypes and stuff like that, and then everything that we have in production as well. I just make sure that we're doing things the way that we should be doing things, and like exploring the right technologies and that sort of stuff to get the job done.
Cool. Very cool. Sounds pretty exciting. So with a game like Transpose, how would you be involved, or how were you involved with that project?
Yeah, so I was involved from day one when we sort of came up with the concept. Because I'm a product lead, I was the product lead essentially on Transpose. And so when we were brainstorming and stuff like that, we came up with the concept of like, we record your actions and we rewind time and we make puzzles out of it. So when we started doing the initial prototype for it, I sort of led the technology of how are we going to architect, how are we going to build this so that we can do that recording, and then what sort of technologies are we going to use to play back that recording in a way that's sort of super rewarding for the players, and also gives our game designers the tools that they need to build the different puzzles and stuff like that as well. And so moving from sort of that prototype, we used that prototype for funding. And so once we got the funding and went into like a full production cycle, I was there again from the first day, helping to sort of to steer that technology stack and make decisions in that. And also as like a product lead, just making sure the overall quality of the product is up to the standards that we have at Secret Location, that it's fun, that it looks good, and that it's going to play really well on all the platforms that we wanted to hit. Cool.
Very cool. Does that touch your work on Transpose? Does that have you manage the design and like the feel and graphics as well, or was it mostly tech side?
It's mostly tech side for me. We have like a lot of talented people here at Secret Location that work on our projects, and so we have a lead game designer who is in charge of making sure that the game is fun and that we have the right amount of mechanics and stuff like that play well. And then we have art directors and sort of design directors as well that steer the visual fidelity of the game and work with the game designer to make sure that when we develop components or we develop like character models, that it's expressing the right things from like a gameplay perspective as well as like a visual fidelity perspective. And then I sort of just am like the end gut check at the end where they put this together, and then I try to stay out of their discussions. And so I come in with like a fresh set of eyes once it's been implemented to be like, yeah, this actually makes sense. And it comes across, what you're trying to convey is coming across to me really loud and clear.
That makes sense, yeah, because with them handling that, I imagine it's easy to get lost in the weeds, and you can walk in with fresh eyes and be like, whoa, what's happening here?
Yeah, exactly. Especially like when you're like 6 months into a project on a year-long production and you're in it every day. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees, and that's sort of where I come in and just make sure things are working properly.
Cool. Very cool. As far as games that Secret Location has made, I'm only aware of Blasters of the Universe and Transpose. I know you've made other things like The Great Sea, I think is a film that you guys made. It seems like Transpose couldn't be more different from Blasters of the Universe, like tone and everything. Was that a deliberate choice, or did it just kind of happen that way? Like after Blasters, where you're like, okay, we're going to 180 something totally different, or how did that sort of happen?
Yeah, so definitely after Blasters, like that was one of the longest productions that I've been involved with here at Secret Location. It was probably a year and a half, and we were in early access for 12 months of that 18-month cycle. So by the end of the project, like everybody was really happy with the product, but at the end of that 18 months, you want to do something a little bit different. Like you don't go directly into, Blasters of the Universe 2 and just double up on fart jokes, So, and the way that we sort of choose our next projects is that we open it to everybody on the team to pitch ideas, and we rank those ideas and sort of discuss them and sometimes mash a couple of them up. And so we always want to make the games that we want to see made. So, naturally, I think that the team being on that project for so long, a lot of different ideas were sort of under the surface bubbling for the last 6 months, and that sort of came to the front, and that's sort of how we chose to do Transpose. And that's not to say that we're not going to do more blasters in the future, but at that time, I think the team just needed a break from a shooter, a big, bright, neon shooter, and wanted to do something different.
Cool. Yeah, I did enjoy Blasters. It was a lot of fun, but Transpose, I'm so glad you made it because that was a blast. It was so great. I tried playing again last night. I haven't beaten it yet. I think I'm like 7 hours in, and I got really stuck on one of the puzzles, and I finally broke through last night. So
nice.
Go me. Yeah. Some people would say that there's nothing new under the sun. You can only remix things. Like you can only take 4 sources and make it your own.
Yeah.
So I found Transpose to be unique in a lot of ways, but were there any outside sources of inspiration that really sparked it, or either the design, the mechanics, or anything else?
Yeah, so the original idea came from, I was playing a mobile game. It's called Does Not Commute. And basically it has a time rewinding mechanic where you have a single screen and you have to drive a car from point A to point B across the screen. Time rewinds. You're in a different car at a different point. You drive to a different point in the map, but your previous car drives as well. So, and it just keeps layering up on top of each other until you get like 8, 9, 10 cars driving across this landscape on a single screen. It gets really crazy. And I thought to myself, wow, that'd be, we've seen the mechanic before in a bunch of different games. What would that be like in VR, and what can we do in VR that's unique to that game mechanic? And just having the full body representation of players in there, playing back their actions one-to-one in real time, I think focuses on what VR does well with that mechanic that people recognize very well.
Right. Yeah, totally. I also really enjoyed when you were talking about being immersed and seeing yourself one-to-one. Speaking of one-to-one movement, I feel like the IK you did on the arms worked really well. Like, I don't know, I can't exactly pinpoint how, but using the hands and the hand sliders and the rings and looking at the way the hands rotated, it felt the most legit like my hands, if that makes sense. Like, it was really well done. So
yeah, thank you. I've spent a lot of time on that, and at the beginning of the project, we try and talk about, what are the key things that we think are important for this game or for this thing that we're making. And from the very start, it was like, well, if we're going to have full body representations, we need to have the player feel like their full body is in there from the start. So we really worked hard on the hands and the arms and like integrating the UI onto those things as well. So you're not, pulling up some other sort of floaty menu and stuff. We tried to incorporate everything into the user's body. And so when they're in there playing the game and it plays back, they make that connection one-to-one that that's me and that's what I did and I can recognize myself.
Right, totally. And that's a great way to take advantage of the new medium. Instead of there's so many experiences in games out there where your controller is just a mouse pointer, it's just a laser pointer. It's like, aren't there more interesting things we can do,
Exactly, so. Yeah, exactly. And that's what VR is there for, like that level of immersion, and that's what we sort of look for.
Right, totally. How early in a project like Transpose do you get a sense of how it'll look like? Like, when you very start, are you looking at look development already and style guides, or is that sort of later down? Let's just throw some graphics in there. Like, how early do you get the look in there?
So when we usually do our prototypes, like the art that are in our prototypes is very much developer art. It's like white boxes, different colored, plain flat textures. Like in our original prototype, we just had floating hands as well, because we wanted to really just nail that replay mechanic and see how that felt. And at the same time as my technology department is sort of developing that stuff, we have our artists doing, some mood boards and exploration into sort of how this could feel based on playing the prototype and sort of where the game designer wants to take it in terms of mechanics. And then once we get into production proper, we sort of look what we did in development and pick the good things that we liked, that we think would work well, and start sort of iterating on that. So as we work towards our internal alpha from a gameplay perspective, our artists work towards an alpha or like a look development 3D sort of scene where they're like, this is what we want the game to feel like, this is what we want it to look like. And so we have these two things at alpha where it's like the gameplay and the look. And then from there we start, pushing those two things closer together and implementing the art into the gameplay and sort of tweaking it as we see fit based on user feedback and stuff like that. So I guess from day one, we start thinking about it.
With Transpose, I'm curious, and this kind of is about VR development in general. When it comes to normal, quote, normal game development, I imagine, people in front of a computer all the time. But when you're making a VR game, how much time are you hopping back in the headset or back to the PC, like going back and forth? What's that like? Is that a real challenge or advantage, or how is that?
I think, to answer your question, it's like constantly, in and out, in and out, in and out. It's not unusual to see a row of developers just with the headset sitting on top of their head, and they'll be like this, and then they'll hit play and just flick their head, and the headset is down. At this point, it's to a fine art. But I remember originally when we started developing, it was hard for us to get in that of like, checking things in the headset. Initially, we just reviewed things on the screen like we usually did in our usual workflow. Like people would throw something up on the TV, we'd sit around and comment and stuff like that. And then we found that once we got into VR, it just felt totally different. So now we don't do any reviews that aren't in VR of art, of mechanics, of anything, because it just feels totally different to being on a flat screen to being in VR. So we have some tools and stuff that let us get pretty far without having to get into VR. Like we have player rigs and stuff like that we can use a mouse and keyboard with to sort of get so far in development of like different mechanics, but we're always getting back into VR to test those things for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. You keep the real thing. You just have to see it, how it's going to be experienced. Yeah,
exactly. That's true.
I guess this is kind of the same, but different. Are there special challenges in VR development versus typical gaming development? I mean, obviously having to wear the headset all the time is one, but what other, I'm sure there's a million of them, but what are real particular challenges in VR gaming versus traditional?
I think like interaction design is quite challenging at the moment in VR. There's a lot of mechanics that just don't exist in traditional quote unquote flat screen or 2D like gaming. I think that like everybody understands how to use a mouse and a keyboard to do things on their computer, how to play first person shooters and all that sort of stuff. But when you translate to like physical activities, that's where like you really have to focus on like making a really clear, concise tutorial that helps people understand what they're doing in their game. Like even for Blasters of the Universe, we found that like we just assume people would just be like, oh yeah, I just shoot with my gun and I block with my shield. But yeah, you really have to like hone in on that tutorial stuff. And then like from a technical side, definitely hitting that 90 frames per second is like a big challenge sometimes. Like the artists want to have things big and bright and beautiful and like super high res and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if it's not running at 90 frames, it's not going to make it onto the stores, and it's going to make people feel sick when they play it. So it's another big thing that we really have to focus on in terms of our development.
That's a good point. Optimization, mostly because I don't program, but when I'm playing a game, like it'll astound me how like you'll have some game, like let's say throw out Skyrim VR, it plays so smoothly, but then I'll play an escape room game. It's one little closet and I have reprojection. And how is there such a disparity between optimization? But it's got to be its own art. Like I imagine it's just, you have to work with math and magic to make it happen.
Yeah, a lot of black magic to get it to happen as well. Like, we've done a lot of like things that for optimization purposes that you typically wouldn't do in game development. But I think it just comes down to like the developer and the quality of the product, and then time and budget as well. Like it's hard to keep projects within those two time and budget constraints. And I guess sometimes you just run out of time to do it and you have to release in the state that it's in. But we try and think about it at single location from day one. So whenever any art goes in there, it's like, this looks cool, does it run at 90? If not, okay, let's do some iterations on this to make sure it's running smoothly.
I feel like I see a lot of independent developers just going for it on Steam and other platforms, like them saying, hey, I quit my job and now I'm making this game. And more power to them. You know, you should pursue your dreams and all that jazz. But there's definitely a challenge because there aren't many headsets, and there's more games coming out every single day. And so, can you speak a bit to that challenge as far as the VR market in gaming in particular? And if there is an aspiring dev listening, any advice you would say besides don't do it?
The industry is quite small still compared to like traditional gaming. So, you know, it is hard to get out there and like get your game seen by a lot of people. And it's even like hard to get funding to like make those games. And I'd say like, if you're a small developer and you're planning on like quitting your day job to go and make VR games, maybe make the game in your spare time first and see how that first one goes before you like, you know, quit your game and stuff like quit your day job, sorry, and get into that sort of thing. We're lucky in Canada and especially in Ontario. There's a lot of funding that they have for the arts and like technology. So for like game development and movie development and stuff like that. And so we tap into a lot of funding like that here at Secret Location, which helps mitigate the risk that we have when we launch a product. And then on top of sort of like production funding, they also give you marketing funding and stuff like that as well from a bunch of different funds. So I mean, as with anything, anytime you make a game, you can't just make a game and throw it on Steam and just be like, well, I'm done. People are going to see it and I'm going to make, you know, millions of dollars now. I think once you make the game and release it, then it's just the beginning of its sort of life cycle in terms of like marketing and getting it out there and getting enhanced people and like talking to like influencers like you and getting Twitch live streams, you know, talking to the community, Discord, all that sort of stuff. So it's, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of work, and we have a team here of diverse people that have those different skills. Thankfully, at Secret Location that we can lean on. So, yeah, I'd say if you're thinking about quitting your job to do this, maybe do it in your spare time first, and just see how that goes.
Cool, good advice. That's great that Canada has funding for the arts and such. Canada's looking better every day, if you ask me. Are there any future projects you can discuss at Secret Location? I mean, I guess they're all secrets, right? You can't talk about it.
I mean, I can talk broadly about them. So our next set of projects are going to be not focused for at home market. They're going to be focused for like free roam sort of warehouse scale experiences. Sort of like things like The Void is doing with their Star Wars and Ghostbusters and that sort of thing. So we're going to be developing content in our content department that is for that free roam market. And then obviously in our product department, we'll be developing hardware so those two things can sort of work together. So yeah, wireless, you know, walking around 4 people, 5 people, 6 people working together to work through maybe some puzzle stuff, maybe some shooter mechanics, that sort of thing. That's where our head is at the moment. And I think that's really exciting. Like it's the home market is great, and sort of tethered headsets are great as well. But I feel like the future of VR is in these sort of larger scale free roam, you know, warehouse scale experiences where you can have a bunch of people in the same room together, interacting with physical objects that map to one-to-one with virtual objects. That's really interesting for us here. So that's where we're moving with our next projects.
Cool. Very cool. That's exciting. Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to work on that transpose level that has me stuck. Maybe take another 3 days to work on that. But thank you for making it. Like I said, it's one of my favorite puzzle games, and it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate your time.
Cheers, Ben. Thanks.
Well, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe. See ya.